Good morning, hello, and welcome to this week's Football Digest podcast. And some of my good chums and colleagues joining me this week. Andy Dunn, my colleague from the Mirror, Chief Sports Writer. Jeremy Cross, Chief Sports Writer for the Daily Star. And Matt Dunn, Rothman's Collector Supreme, Leonardo of football and all things from the Daily Express, joining me this week. Plenty to get through, guys, as I'm sure you'll agree. What a week. I always look, I don't know whether you guys agree, but international breaks, I think, might be a bit quiet, might be a little bit of a dull fortnight. Fill the pages. The news editors are thinking about obscure features, strange things that you would never normally get in Premier League weeks. And then it all kicks off. Every single international break, there's a scandal. So we'll be looking at that. England, where do we stand ahead of the game? I mean, you know, the news agenda has been dominated this week by FA Chairman Greg Clark and his exit. I mean, blimey, what a DCMS disposition by a few people, and we'll go into that. Scotland, do we need the Tartan Army at championships? I think so. Northern Ireland also involved, of course, Joe Gomez, the fallout for that for England and indeed Liverpool. And we'll also have a little look at Paul Pogba. What on earth is going on with Paul Pogba and France right now? But let's start with England. We were all involved in Gareth Southgate's press conference yesterday, and we do have this amazing insight. I think it feels like he's being beamed into your front room at times, doesn't it? Via Zoom, really with things to say. And I thought he was actually back to form. If he was a little bit moody the last couple of times by COVID-idiots and coronavirus, then I actually thought he was sort of kind of dropping a few funnies, really. I mean, Andy, I'll start with you just because you asked a great question at the end there about the Jack Grealish and Mason Mount, which drew a brilliant answer, which suggests that Gareth spends perhaps far too much time, like the rest of us, on social media, really. But just tell us about that. What was the question and what brought the answer? Because it didn't half make me laugh.
That was an eye opener, wasn't it, John? You know, we hear so much from the likes of Southgate that they ignore social media, they block it out, and it's clearly that he's had his head in his computer screen for a long time, searching out all these what do they call them, memes.
Memes. Get with the times.
But anyway, so basically the question was about the growing, clamour for Jack Grealish to be a central figure in this England team, and also about the criticism of Mason Mount, because obviously, if you remember, in the last Nation League games, the two games, Jack played against Wales in a friendly and was outstanding, but then didn't get a minute of action in the two Nations League games, what you would call loosely competitive games. But Mason Mount did, and obviously when England were beaten by Denmark in that second game, it was pointed out, how does Mason Mount start ahead of Jack Grealish? And then, so the question was designed to say, is it fair that Mason Mount, is basically the fall guy, gets the whipping boy for the people who think that Grealish should be in the team? So he laughed and he says, well, I'll speak about Mason Mount, he says, because it will give basically all those people, these Villa fans, something to, retweet as memes of him talking about Mason Mount. Because when Gareth Southgate was asked a question about Jack Grealish a couple of games ago, with how good Jack Grealish was, he answered it by saying how good Mason Mount was. And this sort of went viral amongst Villa fans, and obviously went on from there. And he was gently taking the mickey out of himself, which was really good, and I agree with you. He actually was back on form. It was almost as though he'd sort of, it's strange because, he gave a great answer to that. And for the record, he said, they're not blind to a good player. And he explained why Jack Grealish hadn't been in the squad and now was, and how he'll play a bigger part. So that was great. But you're right. Southgate was actually back on form. It's really strange. It's almost as though, and Matt Dunn asked a question about, the referred to the fact that every get-together now seems to be prefaced by some off-the-field issue that is nothing to do with, mud on boots, ball on the field, and whether it's players, breaking COVID rules, or in this case, someone in the boardroom being an idiot. It's almost, you think, well, does Southgate get fed up with this? He must, every single press conference he's coming into, it was a rare question about football when we asked about Jack Grealish. But Southgate actually seemed to, I wouldn't say relish it, but he just copes with it so well. And wrote this morning that if he wasn't the manager, he would be a great chairman because he just deals with these issues very, very, very skillfully. And I thought he might be like, oh no, here we go again. I'm now doing questions on the chairman and his, what he said. But instead, he was great. And as you say, I think he was back to form.
Yeah, Jezza, the other one that caught my eye, just sort of analysing a press conference, was the one about Jude Bellingham, which, let's be honest, has created a bit of discussion, hasn't it? Is it too old? Is it too early for him to be called up at 17? If he gets on tonight, then basically he'd be the third youngest England player of all time behind Rooney and Walcott. Clearly people have been sort of saying, what about Barkley and Maddison? And again, that kind of prompted the belief, didn't it, that basically, Gareth Southgate has been checking social media to see the stick that he's been getting. I don't know whether you think that's, that's the thing about Bellingham is right, the call up, but also, it was an interesting insight into the manager. And I think recently he's been getting a little bit of stick, hasn't he? People beginning to question his management for the first time. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that he's almost taken notice.
Firstly, Bellingham, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Look, he's clearly a very gifted player, and Gareth studied him in training at St George's Park and clearly liked what he saw. So he thought, why not? 17 is very young, but if you're good enough, you're old enough. That's the old adage, isn't it? And we've seen other teenagers, start like this. And look, if he's going to be probably the bedrock of the England midfield for the next 10 years or so why wait another 18 months to groom him into that setup? Get him in now and let's see what he can do. Southgate on Twitter, look, whether you like Twitter or not, I mean, we're all on Twitter ourselves through work and stuff, and it's another sign that Southgate is the modern manager, isn't he? Could you imagine somebody like, I don't know, Bobby Robson spending 2 hours a day on Twitter? It'd just be, you just couldn't ever see that. I mean, could you? It'd be funny to see him contribute on Twitter, no doubt. But Southgate realises that the world can be played out on Twitter these days, rightly or wrongly, and that's the times we live in now. So, he clearly canvasses opinion and goes on there to see what people are saying and writing about him, and so he should, because he's one of the most powerful men in the country. And I read Dunny's piece this morning, and basically saying, if ever you wanted someone to become the next chairman of the FA, Southgate ticks every box. I mean, it'll never happen. I'd be amazed. I mean, look, will he go into that sort of role after the England job? Probably not. He'll want another job in management, but maybe in later life, he clearly would be a great candidate to lead an organisation like the FA. I think he's had a really rough ride lately for reasons nothing to do with himself. Players have let him down. Off-field headlines. Now Greg Clark's obviously turned the FA upside down this week with his stupid comments to the government. So, but he's handled everything brilliantly, I think. And I mean, he'll be looking forward to just getting a match out of the way tonight. But let's watch some football and see what we can do. But he's grown in stature, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I do feel that the last time we were at Wembley, after the last treble header, I mean, it seemed to have played an awful amount of games, actually, bearing in mind this weird truncated season. I felt, and I don't know whether you agree, that there were just questions for the first time about Gareth Southgate and his management. On the back of maybe Grealish, this public campaign. If we had that, it wasn't a very inspiring performance. You had 2 players sent off, discipline issues on the back of what happened before. Where are we with England and Gareth Southgate now, do you think?
I think we're probably where all England managers eventually end up, which is victims of their own success and overhyped expectations. Don't forget, he took the job eventually in a circumstance where we didn't have any players, we had no talent, no prospects. We'd had an absolute catastrophe at Euro 2016, and we had nowhere to go. Now, he built that in 2 years and led that into Russia and took us to the top 4 teams in the world, which I don't think necessarily is a fair reflection on perhaps where we are. I think we've overachieved in that spell. And the fact is, we don't have good enough players in key positions to play the sort of football that a manager would want to naturally bring into the role. And yeah, if we had a good enough team to spare us a player, then you'd stick Jack Grealish in there and have him dictate play all you like. But unfortunately, we need 11 players who can defend, because the 10 wouldn't be good enough on their own, because key players, centre-backs especially, and central defensive midfielders aren't of the calibre required to form the bedrock to give the platform to a player like Grealish, which is, I think, his frustration. I think that comes into the sort of playful way that he answered Andy's question yesterday. He knows he'd love to play. I'm sure he'd love to play a Jack Grealish and be able to stick him in and say, go and do your stuff, Jack, and the rest will mop in around you. But those players aren't good enough to do that for him. And against the very best sides, we will get found out with that being a man light defensively, which unfortunately Jack, compared to a Mason Mount, is, well, perhaps half a man light. And those are the fine margins that are going to cost us at the back end of tournaments.
Andy, are we guilty of overhyping Jack Grealish a bit? I mean, I know, you know, I know we go around full circle here, but basically, you know, I don't know whether we're sort of kind of in a position whereby in previous times, sort of Jack Grealish wouldn't have been this sort of, you know, sort of national, become a sort of almost a national debating point. I mean, I love Jack Grealish. I think he's a great entertainer, but on the international stage, is he that international player?
Well, we will find out, won't we? You know, he's only been on as sub once, and started the game against Wales, and that's it. You know, for someone of his age, that's very little sample on, considering you know, he's not a youngster, as in the sort of Bellingham mode. Are we guilty of overhyping him? Probably yes, but that's because we like that type of player. Everyone likes that type of player, something unusual and something different, something creative, something, you know, there's a maverick about him, isn't there? And we love a maverick because basically, I think and this sort of like filters into the Mason Mount discussion, is that we are used to Southgate's basically proteges from St. George's, aren't we? We're used to the lads who come through the system, played under 16s, under 17s, under 19s. They've got St. George's Park DNA in them. You know, they're efficient, they're lovely lads. They're incredibly well behaved. They are, they come through the system, which Gareth, of course, was heavily involved in and loves. They love that sort of production line that deals in all aspects, produces well-rounded, organised players and individuals. And Grealish isn't that. Grealish has not come through that. Grealish has been the maverick. Grealish has been involved there. Grealish has come from the wrong side of the tracks. Grealish sort of, gets into trouble now, into the wrong sort of areas. So the pitch, he also does for, he'll wander around on the pitch. He'll take up positions, that are against rigid tactical plan. And that's why we like him, because it's something different. We all like something different. We all want to see that. And that's why the climate is for him, is because as effective as England, and for example, as they extend in the World Cup, the spark of creativity still is something that you are searching for, and that's what he can provide.
Yeah, I want to see an entertainer, Jezza, don't you? I want to see a Jack Grealish. I want to see a maverick over stats.
Yeah, look, it was interesting actually. After the game against Wales, when he was man of the match, we interviewed him. I don't know if you remember, but he was. Yeah. We mentioned the fact that he'd had comparisons to Gazza, who for me was my favourite player of his generation, because you just never knew what he was going to do, but you knew whatever he did do would be something pretty spectacular or different, and that's why you go pay your money, innit, to go watch football. But and Grealish, look, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Gazza. I think Gazza was a one-off, but he's got that same sort of feeling about him. We just don't see him enough, do we? And what impressed me about him was that he actually embraced the comparison to most players would be running scared of being compared to Gazza. And he said, "Bring it on." That's an honour for me. I loved watching him play, and you got the feeling that he sort of moulds himself a bit on Gazza. He's a bit of a cheeky chappy and plays with his socks down. He's just a bit different to the rest, and we need players like that in the game. My issue with Grealish is he's clearly a very talented player, but with respect to Aston Villa, he is their main player, and he carries that team. And I'd like to see him perform on a regular basis in a really top class side, just to see if he can do it.
Yeah, just because he's the focal point for Villa. He's
a big fish in a smallish pond, isn't he? Really, I don't want to put Villa down because they're having a good season, but he's linked with Man United. For example, if he played for Man City, would he play every week? Would he be one of their best players? If he was, then you would think, crikey, this guy's a genuine genius.
Yeah. Dunny, the other Dunny. I am guilty of doing a BBC here. Talking about overhyping someone while shamelessly, absolutely, completely overhyping him myself, really. But I mean, moving on from Jack Grealish, where do Republic of Ireland tonight? Basically, that's a fairly decent test, isn't it, for England? But it's going to be a sort of a strange mix and match team. Obviously, maybe the A team, if you like. The first team is saved for the Nations League games, but it's a decent test for England tonight, isn't it?
Of course it will, not least of which because of the passion that they'll come up against, and it's not just a friendly. There is that sort of local rivalry. There's the historic rivalry between the two countries. All of that funnels into the game tonight, and it's a game where we're playing against a team schooled in a similar way of playing. So there's the familiarity of that will sort of counteract each other, and it'll be a tough challenge. We've always struggled. Not actually. Historically, we've struggled to play against what should, on paper, be comfortable games against our close rivals. But actually, recently, I think we've handled them a little bit better, that rivalry. And recent games against Wales, for instance, were more one-sided than perhaps certainly the Welsh might have hoped. But no, it'll be a tough test, not least of which because it'll be an unfamiliar England team, whichever sort of outfit he puts out there. And I think there is also a danger that there's going to be some individuals like Jack Grealish, like others who are playing for places, and that does sometimes get in the way of the team dynamic. So it was a slow starter against Wales a little bit, and then they found their feet. So I see something similar happening again tonight.
Yeah, Andy, analysing the two lineups, you'd have to say that England have the sort of the players and the quality, don't you really?
Oh yes, I mean we forget actually that if you look at the England squad at the moment, and he's picking more players of bigger squads, they have got a lot of options. You've got players who aren't now automatic starters, players of the ilk of Jadon Sancho, for example. Just one. These are high quality players that basically are not first choice at the moment. So he's got an awful lot of options. I mean, I think it will be interesting to see. He's obviously made his mind up on a system, hasn't he? And seeing how that works. Hence his explanation for Jude Bellingham, which was, very interesting. That he can play in that two in the centre of midfield. I'm not entirely sure I bought into that, but he's clearly going to play a particular system, and I do think it's still I think it remains. Regardless of the results of these three games, I think going into a tournament next year, hopefully, touch wood, it remains, an exciting England team. There's no getting away from it. They keep producing decent results. Okay, the Denmark was a setback, but considering they got a guy sent off early on, almost understandable. Yeah, I think it's an exciting team with a lot of options. I still wouldn't know what the best centre back, sort of central defensive. The best three there would be. Still have reservations about the keeper, but only based on his club form. But I think, going forward, I think they've got a lot of options. And again, without going back to him, I think Grealish will give an extra dimension to this team and make it more exciting.
Yeah, Jezza, I guess Republic of Ireland is the warm up, isn't it? It's the friendly. The other two games, England can still do something in the Nations League, aren't they? I mean, it's been a mixed bag of results, but basically, Belgium to come, Iceland, wherever that might be. Let's hope it's at Wembley rather than sort of kind of Germany. But I guess we're building up to those two games, aren't we?
Yeah, look, tonight's just a preamble really for the weekend. I mean, the key games, obviously, Belgium on Sunday. Obviously, we beat them not too long ago in a strange game in which we got battered actually for half a game, and then pulled things around in the second half. But it's a weird one in the Nations League because look, we got to the semi-finals in the inaugural competition, and in fact, you got the feeling we were all out there, weren't we? And you got the feeling Southgate really valued it, but obviously his main mission in the next 12 months or less, slightly less, is to win the Euros. So he's playing in one competition, but using it as a stepping stone to build towards next summer and the European Championships, where he probably thinks we've got a decent chance of winning it. I mean, I think we're a bit short of winning it, but we should certainly get to the last 8, maybe the last 4, and then you're obviously relying on a bit of luck and good fortune, aren't you, and having your players fit and healthy. But so it's a strange competition, the Nations League. Should it be taking place? There's an argument to say maybe not. In the circumstances, there's this big debate about should international football be happening, given the fact that players are on their knees already. We saw what happened to Gomez. I think we'll come to that in a bit. But so I just hope he bloods some players tonight, and he's obviously going to play Nick Pope in goal, see how he can do. And midfield's an issue, isn't it, that needs resolving. Like Donny said, the defence is still at 6s and 7s a bit. So he needs to learn things tonight. Not necessarily the results are obviously important for confidence and momentum, but he probably just wants to learn some things he didn't already know about certain individuals.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, there's a couple of things to come off of this England week. The first, let's start with Greg Clark, Matt. I mean, it's just, the DCMS committee this week was designed really, wasn't it, for Rick Parry and Richard Masters to answer why they, hadn't sort of kind of come up with the cash, and it ended up being the Greg Clark, meltdown. Really, I mean, it was just unbelievable viewing, wasn't it? I mean, he went through the card, frankly, on with outdated views and upsetting people. It's shameful, wasn't it?
It was car crash television. I mean, I gather from your Twitter feed you were following live as I was. But yeah, I noted down on my pad 1202. That's when he said the word that these days you just don't expect to hear. Certainly not from a man in his standing. And I have a lot of time for Greg Clark. I think his heart's in the right place. He's a very Christian man. He's also a very ambitious man as well. And I know he's rubbed a few backs up the wrong way within football, but perhaps that's what needs to happen a little bit within football. But that said, you can't have the leader of an organisation putting so much work into this, making the sort of gaffe that he made. And it shows an underlying failure to get his head around some of the core principles that the FA are fighting so hard to lead the way on. Initially you think it's unfortunate, but then when he starts talking about the IT department, and then, I think it was a nuanced thing on the gay lifestyle, whether or not he said coming out was a lifestyle choice or actually being gay could be nuanced, but in amongst everything else, there's no hiding place. He's getting a lot of old fashioned stereotypes. He's displaying those, and if that's at the backdrop in his thinking, and you just think then when he launched into his story about the coach and started even doing the actions of a 7-year-old girl not wanting to have the ball hit at her, you just think, it's just, the girl 2 doors up from me's a goalkeeper, and she's brave as anything. So it is an old-fashioned view that perhaps was prevalent when Greg was growing up, but times have changed, and you can't have somebody that's out of touch with what the message is now leading the organisation. It quickly became clear that whether it was by his own resignation or whether it's direct action, that he basically had to go.
Andy, who do we need next? And also, was Gareth right to champion Paul Elliott in the way that he did yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting that Gareth said, I don't necessarily know whether Paul Elliott is suitable for the chairman role, but he did go on then to highlight all the qualities he thought that Paul had, and basically his admiration for him. I did notice a line where he said it was because he had basically immersed himself in the business of football administration. In other words, he wasn't going at it half-heartedly. I think it's probably a reflection of where we're at, that we turn to Paul Elliott as the basically sole person we know within the FA who might be suitable from in terms of if we want a black candidate to be chairman. You know, it's a shame that the field, well, the very fact that the field within the FA there it is not more broad, more diverse, is actually a reflection of the issues that they are trying to tackle. So I think that's first things first. But yes, listen, I don't know Paul Elliott that well. I know him to say hello to him, to have a little chat to, and I agree with Gareth. You know, he comes across, you know, as a guy who, I mean, I'm sure he'd relish the role. I'm sure he'd do a very good job. But I mean, again, as Gareth said, you have to say basically, you know, the best person for the job should get the job. But what clearly that best person needs to be is certainly more progressive. It wouldn't be hard than Greg Clark. I mean, it's as simple as that, you know. And the whole image of that type of character. And I take on board what Matt said about Greg Clark. I also take on board the complimentary words that Gareth Southgate had to say about Greg Clark last night, and which he did as a caveat to what Clark had done. So I agree with that. But really, what you need is we do need someone who reflects a younger, more diverse, more forward-thinking, more progressive organisation than the FA. No matter what. And again, Southgate touched on this without keep going back to what he said, but the perception, whether it's right or wrong, the perception of the FA still remains a problem. People still perceive it as a staid, the old Blazers, you know, sort of gin and tonics in the boardroom, old, stuffy, old-fashioned organisation, sort of basically with old-fashioned bureaucracy, as epitomised by the guy who's just had to resign. So that needs to change. So whether that be Paul Elliott who leads that, I don't know, but it certainly needs someone far more progressive than we've seen before as chairman.
Andy, sorry to butt in here. Do you not think that mentioning Paul Elliott was a more nuanced attack at some of the other names that have immediately have been put forward? Those that have never done anything in football, but have sat on the pundits' couch and thrown in their opinions. Is that not what Southgate was aiming at? I noticed them name in the ring this morning. I don't remember him. You know, he's done some work local level, but he's not exactly fought his way through the red tape of UEFA and FIFA to try and get sort of initiatives through. And I think
I can absolutely concur with that. I mean, that's Emile Heskey. What, you know? I mean that's crazy. It's just crazy, isn't it? I mean, go on. Sorry, Andy. Go on. What were you going to say? No.
I was just going to briefly say yes. I see where Donny's coming from there, and that's why Southgate is basically saying that one who has put in the hard, you know, troublesome yards, you know, and they, you know, and you can only imagine sort of in the FA, even tape within UEFA's red tape, FIFA's red, wherever the governing body's red tape. I mean, it must be, you know, pretty soul destroying at times. And rather than have some parachute in and say right now, so, you know, as in between, you know, give my verdict on Man City versus Liverpool in the Super Sunday kickoff.
Crossy, what qualities do you think someone has to have to make that job a success?
Well, it's interesting because I was going to ask you, because we've got, you know, Mark Bullingham basically as chief executive and kind of in charge of the business running of things. And frankly, he's got, you know, a lower public profile, and that's absolutely fine, because if he's doing a really good job and everyone at the FA says that he is, on the business side, commercial side, pulling everything together, then that's absolutely fine. But where I do think then that kind of impacts elsewhere is that you probably need a more high profile, more front of the office sort of chairman. And I felt, you know, I don't, Matt's right. I mean, from what I know, Greg Clark has upset people within football, let alone about Tuesday, because he left the EFL with the EFL thinking, you've been a bit duplicitous in leaving us here to join the FA. He's then upset the Premier League with Project Big Picture meetings. And so basically, you know, he's alienated himself a little bit in football. And I think quite apart from moving with the times and, you know, being a diverse appointment, I do think that we need an appointment that's, you know, modern, that is in touch with the game, that the players can relate to.
I'm just going to say that.
I mean, one of the biggest things, I don't know whether you agree, is that basically if the players feel as if that the FA is outdated, if we've got an issue here with diversity, we have to address that. And that, where do we start with addressing that? We start with the very top. And I think the chairman must be important. Sorry, Jeremy.
No, go on. I was just going to say you're right, because it's ironic. We've got this young, vibrant team with real big personalities in it, like Sterling, who's done so much good work to tackle racism. You've got Rashford running rings around the Prime Minister over the free school meals. You know, these young men who are aware of what's going on in the world and what needs to change, and they're doing so much good work on and off the pitch. You know, they're wonderful footballers too. And then you've got the play for an organisation when they represent England, which is just so stale and, you know, living in an archaic time. It's just, there needs to be someone at the front of that governance that's a link between, like a slightly older reflection of the team. Do you agree?
But it's not got to be someone who just talks a good game. That's the point, I think. It's got to be someone who knows or has the capacity to get things done. You mentioned Marcus Rashford there as a great example. He's not only carried a strong message, he's actually affected real change. And you need a character at the front who's not just outspoken on diversity issues, but actually knows how we are actually going to change opinions, change thoughts, and actually get things through. I mean, Paul Elliott's achievement in getting the diversity code is, I think, what Southgate was applauding. He's actually affected real change that, you know, now black candidates will be interviewed where qualified for major jobs. That's a real change on the spectrum. So
yeah, no, I agree with that.
So I think that's what you don't need someone just trumpeting the message that being racist is bad, because we all know that at different levels. We need someone who's going to actually change ideas, change thoughts, and actually so that next time the FA chairman's appointed, that we have more black candidates who are qualified to be considered than just perhaps Paul Elliott.
Yeah, where I thought it was really interesting, Jeremy, you touched on this, was that basically this week we've seen, you know, we're talking about young progressive appointment. Well, blimey, I mean, you know, the FA could have run away from this issue, but put Tyrone Mings up in the press conference, you know, while Greg Clark was leaving the office, effectively. Yeah. Dealt with it brilliantly, and always has, in my experience, while on England duty. He's clearly matured, you know, as we all do, you know, as his career moves on, into his brilliant talker now. And you think in 20 years' time, I wouldn't be surprised if Tyrone Mings is putting himself forward as a future FA chairman. I mean, it's a long way when you hear him talk from when you used to hear Emil Heskey talk as a player. So I guess you know, it's just obvious, isn't it?
It's not that long ago when we all lived through that time when probably if that scenario would have been developing in the day, they wouldn't have put a black player up. They would have put a white player up. But, you know, fair play to Mings. We sat through it, and he was getting bombarded with really searching questions about stuff that's way out of his control and remit as a footballer, really. But he really answered well. I was very impressed with him. He spoke eloquently about everything and didn't duck anything. And, yeah, he's clearly got leadership qualities, isn't he? He shows that on the pitch. And, yeah, there may be a future in governance, like when he ends his career, probably.
Yeah. No, sure. Andy, let's move on. I just want to look at Scotland and Northern Ireland, if I may. Really. Yes. I mean, Scotland are a strange, you know, sort of team, aren't they? They've got great options at left back. strange, peculiar sort of absences elsewhere, really. But what we do know is that they seem to be improving, and a tournament is always richer for having the Tartan Army there.
Well, it would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Absolutely fantastic. And what I would say, I understand what you're saying, but listen, they are, you know, under Steve Clarke, they are a lot more resilient, aren't they? You know, I think they are on a run of unbeaten games. I mean, they're not, you know, setting the game alight, but I think they're probably, I don't know, 7 or 8.
8.
Eight, is it, without defeat? So you would think it's clearly not going to be easy against Serbia. I think they might have a couple of players missing though, and you're right in the sense that from our point of view, from newspapers' point of view, from British media's point of view, it would be fantastic to have them at a European Championships, particularly when essentially, if it goes ahead as advertised, as it was supposed to go ahead, the summer just gone. If it is, very much, a big part of it played here. So it would be fantastic to have them through. Will they win tonight? I haven't seen enough of Serbia to really give a particularly insightful opinion on who'll come out on top. What I do know is that they seem to have a spirit about them now. That if that's anything to go by, we'll certainly stand them in good stead this evening. And fingers crossed, it would be fantastic to see them get through. Likewise, Northern Ireland. And I think they have got a good chance, Northern Ireland. I think there'll be a few fans inside the ground tonight. Slovakia, bizarrely, I think, sacked their manager after they got through on penalties against the Republic. And, I think they've got a great chance tonight. I really do. It would not surprise me if, as in the last set of games, it would not surprise me if we went down to penalties in both of the games.
Yeah, and I think Northern Ireland, Jeremy, deserves so much credit, don't they? I mean, you look at the squad. How have they done that? I mean, that is team ethic. That is work, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah, look, Barraclough took over from O'Neill, who did an amazing job. Took them to the Euros in France, where they were a great addition to the tournament. And when you look at the pool of talent they have and the resources they have, compared to say England, that's the obvious comparison. It's remarkable what they can achieve. I mean, they punch above their weight on a regular basis. They had the heartbreak in 2017 of missing out on a World Cup place, didn't they, to Switzerland through a controversial goal. So they were knocking on the door for the World Cup there. I think if they get through tonight, and I agree with Dunny, I think we've got a fabulous chance. Even 1,000 fans in Windsor Park, that's got to be a massive bonus for them. But their second consecutive appearance at the Euros, that's a remarkable achievement for such a tiny nation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other Dunny, I'm just going to move on to club issues a little bit, and one clearly off the back of England, really, Joe Gomez. What a heartbreak for him. Devastating blow, isn't it, for Liverpool as well, and devastating blow for the player.
It's a huge personal blow because he's had history of injury problems that have possibly held him back further than he would be, than he's already, the remarkable achievements he's made in the game. I think, though, inevitably it's going to become a club versus country row, but Southgate couldn't have distanced any of his players further from Gomez when the actually incident occurred. He made it clear this was just one of those freak things that happens in the middle of a football pitch. And I struggle sometimes, and I do feel a bit of sympathy for international managers. What would Gomez be doing? He might have had a couple of days off, but the chances are, if he wasn't playing international football, he'd be running around Liverpool's brand new spanking training ground and could have done the same there. I don't know if it is a result of an overcrowding of fixtures, but I just think we need to stop sometimes and stop trying to blame people and just feel sorry for the guy. It's going to be a loss for Liverpool with Van Dijk already out for so long, but it's a personal tragedy, and that's the sort of thing that happens in football. It happens to players. It's never fair when it does, and often there's no one to blame, and I think we need to bear that in mind. Just feel sorry for him and wish him all the best in coming back, and hopefully comes back to be the sort of player that he showed signs of being when he did get fully fit.
Yeah, Andy, I mean, it's heartbreaking for him to miss out on the 2018 World Cup, which he definitely would have gone to, wouldn't he? But for an ankle injury. And now, if indeed he's out for the season, he's out the Euros as well.
Yeah, particularly when he's a young man, to have these type of injuries, to be kept out of 2 tournaments, if that happens, at such a young age, is it's heartbreaking, as Gareth made clear yesterday, and you've got to feel sorry. I agree with Matt first and foremost for the player himself, and it could happen. And I agree with Matt in the sense that we're looking now, and understandably there will be now, it will the efforts of club managers to point out the correlation between the schedule and the injuries that the players are picking up will only increase. I noticed last night, so Nathan Ake, I think 5 minutes into Holland's game, pulled up with a hamstring injury, and straight away on social media, everyone was making the correlation between the demands at club level and then having these friendlies and Nations League triple headers in the middle of them. But what I would say is that in Ake's case, for example, he's not. I think he's played. I think he's probably started 3 Premier League games since the start of the beginning of September. His workload hasn't been overly done. Joe Gomez's workload is, I think he's played most of the games. I think he probably missed 1 or 2, but it's not a workload that strikes you as absolutely excessive. But I guess the manager's also saying it was a shortened pre-season, which is why maybe this is happening. And it all goes back to what Southgate is saying about, the international calendar, the football calendar, Europe-wide, globally indeed, is that every single authority, whether that be the FA, the Football League, UEFA, FIFA, they all want to get their competitions done. No one wants to give way. So you've got all the competitions crammed into a shorter space of time. And as Southgate said, injuries will happen. But yes, but again, going back to what Matt said, I think that's right. This is a freak injury by the sound of it. That can happen anywhere. That does happen anywhere, unfortunately. And as I say, you can only hope. We'll get updates, I'm sure, over the next 24, 48 hours. And you can only hope it's not as serious as a lot of people fear.
Yeah, Jezza, I put together the running order rather badly on this occasion because I was going to move on to Paul Pogba, actually. But we should tackle the 5 substitutes next, really, shouldn't we? On the back of the Gomez and what Andy was touching on then. I mean, let's be clear here. The last Premier League meeting, it was voted 13 in favour of 3 subs, 7 in favour of 5. So, while Liverpool and Man City, go on about why they want it, the other clubs don't for their own reasons.
Do you know the 7 were? Do you know the 7 were? I'd be interested to know.
I do, and they were all big clubs, basically.
Yeah, well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much exclusively teams in Europe, to be honest.
Yeah, look, it's plainly obvious that if Pep Guardiola can make 5 substitutions or Jurgen Klopp can make 5 substitutions, that is going to be a huge benefit to them because they have the bigger squads, the better standard of players, because they've got the most money to spend. So clearly it's an advantage. But what makes me laugh is these Guardiolas and the Klopps. I mean, I was at the game at the Etihad last week, and afterwards there was this issue of, the substitutes rule, the demands on the players. Guardiola made 1 substitution in that game. Klopp made 2, and one of those was then forced after Alexander-Arnold went off injured. So, you've got to practice what you preach. If these guys were making 3 substitutions inside an hour every week, then their argument would stack up, but it just doesn't. It just falls down when, you've got the most high-pressured game of the season. That is now has been the definitive game of the domestic season in the last 2 or 3 years. And, it was a really, really good first half. Players were, the pace of it was magnificent. And it all sort of slowed down a bit after the second half. In the second half, it became a bit jumbled and lost its way a bit to the game. But the players probably felt tired. They ran out of steam, maybe. And then you've got Guardiola making 1 substitution when he could make 3. So it doesn't stack up to me.
No, it's a very valid point. I also think if you look at it from the other perspective, guys, I don't know who wants to take this one, but if you are a Brighton, if you are a Southampton, you've got your own ambitions. You don't want to be playing a kind of, one of the big guys that can bring on 5 internationals in one go and to completely turn, what might be an upset on its head and then end up losing.
Well, don't you end up on that very point in the same way Mourinho's been playing his Europa League games, where he knows if you've got 5 substitutions, Pep Guardiola every week will put out effectively an A team in the hope they can get the job done. And if they don't, at half time or whenever, 60 minutes, he brings on the real A team, puts all his star names in, and it's a different way of playing the game. And it's just suited to squad teams. It's not 11 against 11 anymore. It is your best 16 against the other team's 16. And it just changes the dynamic because it gives you so much leeway if you muck up, if you take a gamble with your selection to put things right. And I think that's wrong. It should be about naming your best team to get through the match, naming your best starting 11. And you might get something subtly wrong, in which case make a couple of tweaks. But 5 substitutes, it just loads the game in the favour of the bigger clubs and makes it too one-sided. I think, and also you pay hopefully good money eventually to go back and watch teams. You don't want to be turning up and seeing that effectively you've got a second string team going out to watch, because you get cheated as fans by that.
Listen, I was against, from the very outset, I was against this idea of 5 substitutes. You know, I always trot out the age old about, you know, the Klopp's going for these 5 subs. And as he'll know, in 1966, Liverpool league title using 14 players, not in one game, entire season, 14 players. And that included in a European Cup Winners' Cup campaign that went to the final. Now, I know things have moved on in those 50 or so years since then, but even so, 14 players. Yeah. But what I would say, and all those reasons that the lads have said, T5 subs, I'm with them. I agree. You know, when Jose Mourinho brought on the 4 subs at half time against Antwerp, as I still lost the game. That's the thing. You know, he wasn't doing it for the good of his health. He was doing it because the 11 players had stunk the place out in the first half. You know, so and I remember when these 5 sub rule come in. You know, I was thinking to myself, who's got the first smart aleck to make all 5 changes at once? You know, and basically, well, you have money on no one else but Jose, and I'm just surprised he hasn't done that the 5 yet. And that's not what, in theory, it's designed for. Those things I totally agree with. Also, they could rotate more. I was at Everton versus Man United. You know, they had on the bench, they had Cavani on the bench. They can afford to have these players on, not even in the match day 18, with a lot of Gallo, 150 grand a week, Phil Jones, Gerrard. And you could go on. So these teams can actually rotate if they really want to, but they don't want to take. That's why Pep and Klopp didn't make the substitutions in the game, because they didn't want to take the risk of losing the game. And it was basically a very nice stalemate, but and they didn't want to take that. So they were prepared, really, to like, you know, to make their players, you know, more tired, rather than take that risk. So I agree with everything. The only one thing the whole argument is that I do think it's not correct. The rest of European football, the big leagues, the Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, can have the 5 sub rule, and English football doesn't. I do understand that is an anomaly that shouldn't really allowed to exist. It's clearly, even if only a minor disadvantage, it's a disadvantage for English clubs in Europe. They're having to play with a max 14 players on a Saturday. The other teams play with 16 players. So I just think that is one that, you know, the Premier have been caught out at. You know, but I'm with the lads. I think it should be only 3. I think from the start of next season they should align with 3 Europe, or we should fall into line with them.
Yeah, no, I must say that is a strange standoff and difference between. Now, talking of substitutes, a seamless Alan Partridge style link there. Jeremy, I'm going to come to you on Paul Pogba. I mean, yeah, you know, he played for France, you know, this midweek as well, didn't he? And you know, I mean, really, honestly, where are we going with Paul Pogba? Because we did think this season would be a bit of a fresh start for him, really.
Well, we're going round in circles, aren't we, really? I mean, you know, every few weeks he comes into the conversation. But look, he's been at Man United since 2016, and it's now 2020. And I would struggle to recall half a dozen games that he has really taken by the scruff of the neck and influenced. 4 years he's been at United. We still don't know what his best position is. He's played under 2 different managers. Don't know what his best role is. Can we trust him? You know, he gave away that penalty against Arsenal a couple of weeks ago. It cost United 3 points. There's no discipline to his play. You know, you look at players of the past like the Roy Keanes of this world and the Gerrards and Lampards. They all drove their teams onto trophies from midfield. They were, you know, top class players. And Pogba, for me, look, there's talent in there. There's no doubting about that. But you know, people say he's won a World Cup and he won a hat-trick of Serie A titles at Juve, but with those 2 teams, he was surrounded by really top world-class experienced players like Pirlo and the rest of them. So, you know, I think he flatters to deceive far too often. And if I was United, I mean, they won't be able to sell him in January, but I think next summer you've got to say, look, we tried, and it's not going to work.
No. Matt, are you a member of the Pogba fan club, or
Yeah, like Jeremy says, about 1 game in 20. I mean, when he's on it, he's an incredible player. Let's not forget that. And that must be what's so frustrating as a manager. You know, I remember him standing out in an exceptional French team at the World Cup 2 years ago. And to be that good, to stand out in that company, you are an incredible talent. And it shows that on the biggest stage, it's not something about stages or whatever. He can do it on the biggest stages, but only, it seems, when he wants to. I thought when Fernandes first arrived at United, that kind of gave Pogba a lift, and actually his play improved because he had a mate to share the burden with, and it wasn't all on him, and he had almost someone to play with. And for a little while, he lifted his game as well. But again, you know, anyone people are wired up wrong, I think, to have got to that far in the game and not be motivated to win every single ball of every single game and do something every time they get the ball, because it is hard to get to that level unless you've got perhaps Pogba's talent, but he just doesn't seem to have the mentality to go with it. And it's like you say, as a manager, you either stick with him and say, right, we're going to get determined to get the best out of him. But if you're going to stake your short-term career, which managers is a very short-term career on a player, I wouldn't necessarily pick him as the guy I'd trust, you know, to put to balance that on.
The problem is,
Andy, you love a mercurial midfield talent, Mesut Ozil, World Cup winners. Okay, yeah. I feel you're slightly different in your attitude towards Paul Pogba. Am I?
No. I'm probably not, John. I mean, I am. I share. Basically, it's frustration. I wrote the other day when I went to a United game. You know, I go there and I want to see, because I know there's a great player in there. I know there's a great character. You know, I like his character. I like his infectiousness. I like the way he plays. I know he can galvanize the team. I know he can be a game changer at the very highest level in big games. And every time I go, I then turn around towards the end of the game, fire up the laptop, and find myself writing how bad Paul Pogba's been. The last time I did it was obviously the Arsenal game when, you know, he had, well, never mind giving away the decisive penalty. You know, he had a poor game all around. And I'm writing these things basically not wanting to write them, just thinking, hang on a minute, I should be watching a player at the peak of his powers. You know, he's 27 years of age. He should be absolutely in his pomp. And the thing is, it's a very interesting thing that Dunny said there about you know, managers. What does Solskjaer do in terms of, if you're into short-termism, then you can't afford to keep indulging or keep looking for a way to get the best out of Pogba. Long-term, if United are going to win something with this squad that they've got, Pogba has to be absolutely in the vanguard of this squad. Pogba has to be key to the squad. The fact is that they will beat Everton with Fred and McTominay in the team without Pogba. I mean, you know, if Pogba ever... I think it's a bit late now, but if he wants to be spared on, it should have been at Goodison last Saturday when he was sat there on the bench and thinking, I can't get past, with respect to these two, you know, very, very hard-working, decent players. If he can't get past Fred and Scott McTominay into a United team, then he really, you know, that should be an incentive for him. But going back to what I was saying is that long-term, this United squad will win big games with Pogba at his best, because he knows how to play in big games. He's played in them before. Probably the team that beat Everton will beat Everton, but might, you know, in the very, very biggest games, struggle a little. So Solskjaer is torn between thinking, well, you know what? I know that if Pogba at his very best will help us challenge for trophies, but he'll have too many games like the one he had against Arsenal. And that's why Solskjaer is in a dilemma. And that's why you can't blame him for thinking, you know what? This worked against Everton, and I'll stick with that.
Jezza, I just want to touch on the title race, really. It's so interesting at the moment, isn't it? That basically, you know, Leicester, what a season again they're having under Brendan Rodgers. Southampton, who I absolutely love. I think Hasenhüttl is so much to be admired. I think, you know, really jumped on that bandwagon, make no apologies for it. And Tottenham, could they spring a surprise under Jose? Because that surprised a few of us, including myself, I have to say. You know, could we get an unexpected winner this year? How I know we say it a lot, but basically, is there a realistic chance of that happening?
Well, I noticed last night the odds on Liverpool winning the title dramatically went up because of Gomez's injury, basically, because they now have serious problems at the back, and that is going to cast a huge shadow over their chances of defending the title, because Gomez and Van Dijk were the bedrock of that defence last season that led to that first title in 30 years. So, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, you would have said, look, it's going to be Liverpool's title again. But there's just so many anomalies in this season that you can't predict anything. I mean, who would have thought Southampton would be up there in 4th, 5th place? I mean, it was that last win they had before the international break was 12 months on, almost to the day, since they got hammered 9-0 at home to Leicester. And the job he's done there is remarkable. He's not spent any money, really, has he, Hasenhüttl? He just invested his time in getting the best out of those players that he's already got there. But obviously they've lost Ings now to an injury, so that's going to be a blow. But I don't know. I mean, look, will Leicester run out of steam like they did last season? They're relying on Vardy's goals, aren't they? He was playing out of his skin at 34. If he gets injured, you have to fear for them. They're in the Europa League as well. So, we know the demands of that are really high. Spurs, they're gritty. They've got more grit and determination and substance to them, haven't they? I mean, and they've got such an experienced manager there. They've got loads of talent, especially up front with Kane and Son and Bale. They're going to score goals, Tottenham. I mean, they're going to score so many goals. You can guarantee that. And they're right in it. I mean, yeah, look, I would say you could throw a blanket over 6 teams. Genuinely, could win the title this season. Wow. And I wouldn't want to stick my neck out and pick one. I'm telling you. No. I just, Matt, it's going to be a great season.
Absolutely. That's the point, isn't it, Matt? That I think it will be a really open, interesting season, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But I will stick my neck out, all of them. And I'll say that I really fancy Spurs this season. There's something about the place.
Year ends in one. Yeah,
well, there you go. That's the start. Isn't that the cup? Perhaps they'll win a cup at least. At least it's silverware. No, it's just a fact. It's the way.
I think you'll find their only title came in a year and ending one.
Yeah, to be fair, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Jose was. It's the way Jose's reacted to the setbacks of the West Ham game. He's not thrown his dummy out the pram this time. He's had a little dig on Instagram. I think that went down better than expected within the dressing room. I don't think it alienated players in the way that United players got alienated very quickly. The chemistry seems to be there. And when you look at the face of it, if you're lining up and the 3 players you've got nearest to you are Harry Kane, Heung-min Son and Gareth Bale, you know you're in for an afternoon of it. And to have that talent amassed there, with I think Reguilon's a great signing to give them balance. And now on the right, Doherty, he can play. He's got a right back who can defend, and Inoue, a right back who can attack. So he can pick his players, for any game. Central midfield, he's got players with talent that he just needs to get them to click. But it's there, and then. The heart of the defence perhaps are a little bit more wobbly, but now you take Alderweireld and Sanchez, say, or Dyer, who's come on a lot in that position. You take them ahead of perhaps what Liverpool have got left, and I don't think, and with Lloris behind them as a decent goalkeeper, I know you in the school of goalkeepers, Crossy, you're a big fan, and I am too. I don't think that's a bad first 11, and then when you've got players like Dele Alli can't even get into the matchday squad, it tells you how much talent they've got. Flying through that team, and I genuinely think that this could be the year with Mourinho's winning mentality. If providing he keeps his players going along with him, they could be the ones to beat this year.
If he wins the title with Tottenham, that's surely got to be his greatest achievement, hasn't it?
Brilliant story. What a story!
All the knockers that he's lost it as a manager, people. It's easy to forget how brilliant a manager he was, and how many managers like Ranieri didn't win the title with Chelsea that first term. He did bring some sparkle to that first Chelsea appointment, what he did with Porto. He is a great manager, or he was a great manager, and the question mark is, has he still got it within him? And I just think he's in a good place himself at the moment, and I think that's what's key to whether Mourinho can perform or not.
Be a great story, wouldn't it, Cross? If Tottenham won title under Mourinho, you'd be brilliant, wouldn't it?
I do think it would be a great story, Jeremy. Yes. Andy, Tottenham, can they win it?
No. And,
It's not like us to disagree, Andy.
I tell you what, I'm not as you all know, a man. However, if Jeremy just said that Liverpool have, and I'd get on. I mean, honestly, I think it's like buying money. I can never understand why Liverpool was second favourites behind Manchester City at that age. Liverpool will win this title. Liverpool will win this title. You know, regardless of their defence issues, you know, they do a good defence from the front. That Liverpool team. That's the thing. That's what they've always done. They defend from the front. As long as there's no catastrophic problems or injuries to their attacking options, I think Liverpool will win the title. Listen, you know, first half hour, 25 minutes, they probably should have blown City away on Sunday with the way they performed then. Obviously, it wasn't the same second. But I have, apart from the aberration at Villa, which was a complete aberration, I've seen nothing that suggests to me that Liverpool are still not some distance ahead of everyone else, including Man City, and then Man City maybe a little above everyone else. I would love to share your conviction going to be some wide open title race. I believe Liverpool, and I think they'll win the title. And I think they'll win the title probably not with the same, well, it's impossible probably to win it with the same degree of comfort as they did last season, but I think they'll win it decisively.
Interesting. Now, guys, we normally wind up, and I'm going to wind up the show here with a prediction for the game for the big weekend's games. But obviously, it's International Week, so I'm going to finish with something a little bit different and a little bit of a hobby horse of mine, just about football books. Simply because I interviewed Andy Cole this week, and it sort of maybe inspired me. He's released his new autobiography, and I just want to kind of go around the room, the virtual room, if you like, and just ask you guys for your favourite ever, either football autobiography or football book, because it is, I'm reassured, by the way, going to be an absolute bumper year for football books, simply because, blimey, we're all under lockdown. We've got nothing else to do but read, haven't we, about football and the beautiful game. So I'm going to go around the room. Andy, I'll start with you. Please, your favourite. I mean, please give a sort of a glowing mention to Andy Cole, by the way. But also, just what's your favourite book?
Oh, favourite one. Obviously, we're all primed to say that Arsene Wenger biography by John Cross.
No. That's
clearly just a sense of you taking up and whatever. No, hey, listen, John. My favourite autobiography, football autobiography, goes to time, and it's Stan Tern autobiography, Stan the Man. It is quite simple. The maybe unintentionally, but the funniest books, autobiographies I read. So honest. It is just full of anecdotes about, if any of you know Stan, he's a character, let's put it that way, and not afraid to get into the odd confrontation, shall we say. And I wouldn't own any of the incidents in that autobiography. But I would read. I think it was ghostwritten by Tony Livesey. I'm not sure, but it is just brilliant. It is just brilliant. I remember serializing it. And Stan called up to say, "Listen, you've only put in these bits where I'm having fights with people. I mean, incredible fights with people." He said, "I said, well, Stan, because that's basically pretty much start to finish from the book. Oh, it's incredible. There's a fantastic, and I will not condone in any shape or form road rage, but there's a fantastic road rage incident where he's actually the passenger in the car. He's on crutches." And some guy cuts them up, and they chase him down the motorway, the two outside lanes. Stan's got the window down with the crutch going in. I mean, honestly, it's an old book now. I don't know, maybe, I don't know how long ago, but it's fantastic. So Stan Ternan's autobiography, Stan the Man, well worth a read.
You are brilliant. Jezza?
Bit random this, but he's no longer playing. But there's a journeyman striker called John Parkin who played for Barnsley, and I think he played for Tranmere and a few other clubs in the Football League. His book about his career, but it's more about his life as a footballer, not so much his achievements. Because with respect to him, he didn't win anything really. But some of the scrapes used to get up to, I mean, I can't even repeat the opening paragraph about what he did in a bath is just leaves you mind boggle. But it's just hilarious. He didn't take himself too seriously. He just got into so many bizarre situations. Probably didn't take his career as serious as he should have done. But, you know, he just had a great run at it, you know, earned decent money and had a fun time while it lasted. And there's some brilliant anecdotes in there.
Brilliant. Matt?
You know who I've got to go with? I've got to go with these guys. I've got the greatest football book ever.
Rothman?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I thought autobiographies reached their low point in 2000 when Kevin Phillips had just signed for Sunderland and had that great season and brought out his second autobiography, having already written one at Watford, and he was still only 20. And I think, well, at least have some life before you try and write about it twice. And I think a lot of football books struggled over the years to be interesting because they are churned out by people wanting to make money too early. But yeah, Stan the Man, I'm just trying to spot it. It's over there somewhere. That's a fantastic book. And I think when people are a bit more honest, you and a bit old, you know, a bit older in the game, you get a better read. I'm just trying to think of a specific example. I'm struggling for the moment, but yeah, no, that Stan the Man is a good shout. The other one, Stake Diana Ross by Dave McVeigh, who was in the Midlands for a while, Notts County player. Again, another unsung hero telling really what life's like and can be like. There's some unexpected anecdotes to that, but a difficult one to look out.
Yeah, I always you what your favourite book is, Crossy.
Well, no, I couldn't possibly say. But no, I tell you what, I was going to touch on a couple actually. I thought Ian Ridley's book on Tony Adams, Addicted, was a genre-changing book. Frankly, you know, sort of kind of shook up the, you know, kind of groin strain. We've got Liverpool on Saturday, sort of all the football autobiography, didn't it? Absolutely fantastic. And the other one, bizarrely, bit random, because I do like a football book rather as well as a sort of an autobiography, was Danny Taylor's book about, you know, Man United, which I thought was kind of brought a different, you know, sort of landscape to it, and also kind of revealed about sort of covering you know, Man United at that time. This is the one. So I thought that was a very interesting one. There's a great one, isn't there, which I haven't read, about the former Orient manager. What's his name? It's gone out of my head now. Because it's almost out of print, but everyone says it's a legendary football autobiography. So I love the football books. I shouldn't really read as many as I do, but basically just because you probably need to break away from football, because it's what all we ever talk about and write about. But there you go. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for your company. Really, really interesting note to finish on. So much appreciated. And you know, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for enjoying the show. Hope you did, and hope to see you back here same time, same place next week. Thank you.